Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be moderating this panel today. For those who don't know me, I'm Francesca Wahl. I lead the global charging policy team at Tesla. I think, I'm joined by a very distinguished group of charging industry leaders. They happen to all be female as well. So we're going to be talking today about the customer charging experience, how we're seeing the industry shift and change. And we hope that, you will learn a bit from this group about what that really means, but also that it's a call to action to have more kind of leaders in this space that are women recognized. We kind of look forward to diving in. We will give you all an opportunity to also ask questions. I will ask a couple of questions at the outset to just get the conversation started, but we really want to hear from you. What do you want to know from these leaders up here? And then we'll close out with a little final fun question in a lightning round. So to get us started, I will have everyone introduce themselves, starting with Stephanie, and explain who they are, what they do, and what it means to them to have a seamless, reliable, and trusted charging experience.
Thank you. Hi, guys. So I'm Stephanie Seegmuller. I'm the VP for Solution Consulting for ChargePoint in Europe. For those of you who don't know ChargePoint, it's an electric mobility company that started in America a really long time ago in California, at a time when there wasn't much of electric mobility, to offer a solution in EV charging. So we make hardware, software, services, apps, and everything around the electric mobility solution. So I'm really excited to talk about what's a seamless charging experience. So it's a good question. So 7 years ago, when I joined the industry, everybody had cool war stories about charging. It was snowing, it was dark, the station wasn't where it was supposed to be, the cable got stuck in the car. Ha ha ha, I finally found the station. It wasn't available, it wasn't working. I got charged 60 euros for 5 kilowatt hour. I had to download a app in the middle of a mobile coverage hole. So this was really cool. It's no longer cool. All of those things are not acceptable to any of us, I think, in this room and in the industry. Now you need to know where the charger is. You need to know what you're going to pay. You need to know how to easily start a charge. And you don't even think about it, and you've got no stories to tell. So I think seamless charging experience is silence. There's no stories. It's just part of your life.
So hello again. My name is Vera, Pinto Pereira. I am an executive board member for EDP. And for those of you who don't know, EDP is a little bit older. We actually turned 50 this year, so it's very important year for us. We were originally the electric company for Portugal. Today we are a multinational present across almost 30 countries. And we generate mainly green electricity. About 19% of the energy that we generate is actually green across all the world. We then transmit it, and sell it to customers. My responsibility in the company is actually this last piece. It's this downstream piece of handling the relationship with the customers. And so I run what we call the client solutions business for EDP. We have about 3,300 people across the world who basically sell off this green energy, but also who sell energy solutions like EV charging. And so we have a very important EV business in Spain and Portugal, where our main customer franchise is also based. And that's how I came into contact with this very exciting industry. It's part of this bigger relationship with the customer, and it's part of this bigger energy transition challenge that the industry faces. So when I think about what this means, what is a seamless experience, I completely agree with Stephanie. From the customer perspective, it has to be boring. just no, no strings attached. Just you get there, you know where you can go. It's easy to pay, it's easy to use, and you walk away and you don't think about it again. So that's as boring as we want it. With no follow-up calls, no hassle. For me, being from the energy industry, I actually think of this experience, and if it's wonderful, it has to or should go at some point beyond the customer and beyond this experience. It should actually play a very central role in the overall energy ecosystem, and that's something that I'll be talking a little bit about, because that's how I see the future for EV. It's beyond charging towards powering.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm from Spirii. I'm the COO in Spirii, and I think I will start the discussion because I think it should also be fun, not only boring. Spirii is an EV platform, ChargePoint management system with a lot of attached services, financial services, payment services, roaming, operation, energy management. Founded in Copenhagen, Denmark, and now owned by Edenred. We are operating in more than 20 countries, plus 1 million chargers in our network. So lately, we also entered in Latin America together with Edenred. And customer experience, I believe that customer experience is to understand the client industry, to understand the client use cases, because every single use case have a different customer experience. I agree to some extent to the boring, no hassle, but it is really different use cases that will bring us to the perfect customer experience.
And hello also from my side. My name is Sofia Diakhate and I'm the COO of Plugsurfing. I hope most of you know Plugsurfing already, but for those of you who don't, so Plugsurfing nowadays is an EMSP, and I say nowadays because we have started the journey approximately 13 years ago through a few mergers and acquisitions and transformations. So we've done CPO, we've done CPMS, backend provider businesses, we've done EMSP, and now we're focusing on that. We're not only doing EMSP for ourselves, but we're also enabling others to do that. So basically meaning that we have different B2B customers, car manufacturers, fleets, and also even CPOs who we nowadays offer our network to. And we also do what we call managed roaming for them. So an important thing for Plugsurfing is to fix the roaming problem in one place in the system. So we feel that's the more efficient way of taking care of things. So we've said that we want to fix basically the problem of roaming for the industry. And that is what we're focused on today and have been focused on that for the past couple of years. Going back to the question, I am part of Team Boring. And I think I was said that here a year ago and saying the same, saying that us as an industry would have succeeded when people don't think about us, don't think about charging. And I think I said already a year ago that I believe that most of the people who care about charging in Europe are pretty much in this room, or at least represented by people in this room. And what I mean by that is that the average customer, the average driver, does not want to think about charging. They need to get from one place to the other. Charging is the unnecessary evil that at times happens, at times doesn't, but they don't have the time nor the interest to think about it. So one point for Team Boring of, we need to disappear. It needs to become something that people don't need to think about. And that is when we will have succeeded. And how we go about doing that as Plugsurfing, we like to talk about the 3 big C's. So basically coverage, cost, and consistency. And we think that is how we build sort of becoming boring and customers not sort of having to deal with charging.
So we heard from Stephanie about what the charging experience used to be like 7 to 8 years ago. It was very fun. And now we want to make it boring. But no, I think each of you has sort of hit on a point, which is it's evolved a lot from where we came from, even in a short amount of time. But today, do you still see gaps? And what are those key gaps? And maybe starting with you, Sofia, because you were talking about kind of the 3 C's just now. In those 3 C's, are your gaps?
So yes, and perhaps to repeat in case people didn't catch directly sort of right away what the C's were. So coverage, cost, and consistency. Coverage is quite easily understandable. So basically you need to have a charger be there. The second one is cost. So it's not enough that you have the charger, but the cost needs to be reasonable so that you feel happy after having charged. And then consistency is about everything from beginning till the end, before you get to the charger, whilst you're at the charger, once you leave the charger, it needs to work, and it needs to work over and over again. And that is how you build that consistency and that trust into charging. So yes, there's still some room to improve on the different fronts. But for me, if I take sort of the higher level perspective, I would probably say that the biggest gap is in the lack of predictability for the driver. So there are so many different players, business models, pricing models, this and that. So it's just too unpredictable for the driver to date. So when we need a charge, there's too many options. So we need to sort of improve that, to have things be more predictable for the driver, so that it's not a project to figure out how to get my car charged. So that's the gap I would highlight. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
So someone talked about ecosystem. I think it's really the key, right? Everybody, I think most players in the market now are really trying to have the best experience possible. And everybody's pretty aligned, whether it's boring or fun in a good way. It actually works. Where probably the experience breaks down is when several players are involved and you're passing the experience from one player to the other, a CPO to an EMSP. Maybe there's an intermediary, maybe there's a service that needs to happen. And this is where I think also probably why when ChargePoint came to Europe in 2017, we're so happy to find like-minded people and create this big party called ChargeUp Europe, because really it's about agreeing together about what the standards are going to be and how we communicate to each other that's going to create that ecosystem that's seamless. Because we can't do it individually, we really have to do it. You talked about roaming, protocol standardization, just having a way of creating that ecosystem, because the driver doesn't care who does what in the chain. They just want the whole experience to be seamless.
Yeah, completely agree to the ecosystem and the transparency for the end user, for the EV driver. I also think it's important just to underline that we have really come a long way. So the horror stories, they are not there today. We have other gaps today because we involve all industry involved. Then there will be gaps, there will be new requirements, meaning new gaps that we need to close, hopefully together. But I absolutely agree to the transparency for the EV driver.
Maybe I'll just add to that. Because there were these horror stories at some point, I also feel that as an industry, we need to do a better job at storytelling, or over storytelling at this point, because we need to create a different perception and a different mindset in everyone. Because what's still echoing, and just to tell you a story, not of the past but of the present, we're undergoing tremendous storms in Portugal at the moment, very, very serious, and a large part of the country was left without electricity, and the teams have been on the ground trying to put the network back up, but it's been very difficult. One of the silly messages that was going around on social media was they haven't been able to put electricity back up in my community because they have an electric fleet and they aren't able to charge their cars. Now this is absurd. It's right. It's silly. It's a lie. But this is what goes around on social media. And so this is the only thing it tells me is that we still have a long way to go in terms of storytelling and building the right kind of comfort and perception and mindset. And the other thing is, we usually talk about when we want to make a positive point about the electric experience, we do it by comparing it to the internal combustion engine. So this is either cheaper or faster or easier or whatever. I'm not sure we should be comparing that at all. I mean, we need to think about the electric car like our phone, and it needs to be as obvious as that. It's just something that's there, and we need to charge it, and it's going to happen, and there is infrastructure that's available. So I think we need to change the way we talk about ourselves, to create a different perspective, to create that sort of comfort, and we probably need to overtell the positive stories at the moment, to work against this negative narrative that still echoes.
Maybe following up on that, thinking about the storytelling piece, are there still product innovations that need to happen in order to make the story better in terms of how the customer is experiencing things? Or do you think we have the products today, but it really is just that storytelling piece? Or is it a combination of the two?
There is obviously innovation that still needs to be done. I mean, we've come a really long way. However, for example, I think that there's a lot of, that there's some journey to be made around integrating the public and private charging experience. That's one of the things that we are very concerned about, because whilst, public charging is tremendously important, there's a very large proportion of charging that actually happens in private spaces, be them homes or offices or whatever. And for a driver, he doesn't want to think about his experience in this fragmented way. I'm public charging or I'm private charging. No, I need to charge. I don't think where I plug in my phone. I need to plug in my phone. And this is how, and so integrating this private and public, for example, is one of the things that I think we need to do a better job of in creating that seamless experience. Also understanding and finding the right balance between the slow charging experience, which is more linked to those locations where you dwell and you stay, and you can also take a better advantage of that to then work on that piece that I was mentioning, which is the electric car as an energy asset in the network that can actually contribute to the network in terms of flexibility management, in terms of storage, and having taking better advantage of that energy asset. And then your fast charging experience, which really needs to be on the go and very quickly, and very seamless and hassle free, boring in that sense. So I mean, there's a couple of examples that we are very much working on. We just revamped our EDP Charge app there, and we're doing a lot of work around both smart charging for this dwelling moment, and in terms of bringing the experience together between the home charging and the public charging.
Can I add to that? Because I think both Vera and Stephanie as well sort of touched on something that is important here. So integrating and bringing together, and then you mentioned ecosystem that I think someone else mentioned before. But I think, to me, I wouldn't say that there is a single sort of breakthrough technology that we should be sat here waiting to happen. I think the next stage will be defined by how we're able to actually connect the existing technologies, the existing partners, the existing systems, and everything that we have already. We mentioned CPOs, the MSPs, payment systems, OEMs, fleets, and all of that. So I think it's really about bringing together and integrating all of this into a seamless and sort of coherent and simple experience for the drivers. So I think it's more about that than a single breakthrough technology.
I do believe we in some countries have already seen the integration between the private charging and the public charging. So absolutely agree to the integration and open standards, so we can integrate, so we can all integrate to each other again. There will be one seamless experience, end-to-end experience for the end user.
Speaking of countries, I think one of the things that when we prepped a little bit for this panel, we talked about is the different landscapes in different countries, right? You've got sort of direction from a policy perspective at the European level, but each country may have a different flavor of what's happening. So I'm curious, for those of you that have footprints in key markets, how are you how has that customer experience varied based on those countries' policies, for better or worse? Is there a specific example that comes to mind of something that has worked particularly well or has actually inhibited us from having a really good customer experience?
So, in my post-traumatic disorder state of having to to work with my American colleagues and introduced to Europe, which, as everybody knows, is one country with one language and one currency and one set of hardware regulation, because of course Eichrecht is everywhere in Europe, and so is Shudder. What's been really interesting is to have a lot of the product we introduce. We've experienced the difference in experience between North America and Europe when introducing new products, of course, because being an American company, a lot of our products are designed in North America for the North American market, and then they come to Europe, and then we discover that actually, if we want the same level of customer experience, which is really the goal, right? There's no reason why the Europeans should get less. Then there's so much more work that needs to go to just get every single country in Europe to the same level. Customer support needs to be in the local language. You can't expect a French, I'm well placed to know, to get support on a charging station in anything else than French. But to be fair, it's also true for the Germans and the Spaniards and other languages as well. Certainly, the regulation also creates things to sort of think about how you're gonna factor this in. And the problem is also local regulation, and maybe it's a point you'll get to, adds cost, which then if you're trying to invest to get to that perfect customer experience everywhere at the same level, you end up having to spend a lot more money for markets that are comparably smaller. So your return on investment is also a question you need to ask yourself.
Now, I just wanted to add that, and also think that we learn from each other, right? So, for instance, Spirii is founded in Denmark. There were 5-6 years back a lot of government tenders for the highway charging, municipality tenders. So all parking spaces should have the EV charging, and we see the same now in the European countries. So we can learn from each other. So where we have all the good examples, we can bring that to the other countries. And then of course we are different, and it brings some challenges, but I also think it brings opportunities that we can take all the good things and maybe try not to bring the not perfect things to other markets.
Just add on the European deployment. I think the struggle in Europe is often, and then I'll talk about the Portuguese case as a good example of that, but the European experience is often we regulate and define to an enormous extent with great intention, with extraordinary positive intention, but that when it comes to deployment, each one goes out and adds their own, beyond the local flavor, they add the local specificity and requirements, and it just becomes a nightmare in terms of the differences in implementation that we actually arrive at. And so not only do we speak different languages, but we have a tendency to try to make our thing very much our own. A good example of that is the Portuguese mobility model. Although looking in hindsight, I can now say maybe there's a positive angle to it. So Portugal decided a few years, many years back, that it was not going to do anything like any other European country. It was going to have a system, the MOBI system, which is a sort of a clearing system, publicly owned, that sits in between the CPO and the retailer. So completely the opposite of what is EU compliant. This required, obviously, enormous adaptation of everything for the Portuguese market, which, by the way, is small, not to say minuscule. And the only thing now, in hindsight, that I can say is that it did force interoperability beyond probably what we would have had in such a small country with a couple of big players. And I think that was good. So today, when we look at the Portuguese market, it's well served in terms of charging stations, and it's also well penetrated in terms of EVs. About over 30% of new car sales are EVs. Also because the government subsidized them. So I think looking back, they did a good job. Fortunately, we're now aligning by the EU model, which I now think will facilitate the inflow of investment, larger plays, and interoperability between Portugal and other countries. So that's just one example. Yes, it was good because it forced that interoperability, which is also insightful to what we're discussing, which is one of the main key success factors for EV charging is in fact interoperability. Other than that, I think it's good that we're now finally aligning by the EU model and moving away from that awkward thing.
And perhaps to add a bit when it comes to the US, because I think you were also asking about that. So us as Plugsurfing nowadays owned by Corpay, it's been already 3 years, so time flies. But Corpay is a US-based company, and through that we have actually also some footprint in the US, so we have some experiences about that as well. And if you compare the US market to Europe, I would say, and obviously someone who's actually based in there, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my sort of perception is that we are ahead of the US market when it comes to interoperability and when it comes to ecosystem thinking. And by ecosystem thinking, I'm talking about all of us coming here together and understanding that we need to work together to make this a success. So for instance, in the US, the networks or CPOs, to my understanding or from what we see, are not that open in collaborating directly with customers and EMSPs. So I think we are definitely ahead of the US at the moment on that. But I do think that the challenge now will be sort of scaling implementation at scale. And I think that is where we'll see sort of who the winners are. So basically transforming or translating this leadership that we now have into simplicity for users and into scale. And that's as I said, where we will see sort of who the winners will be. But right now I think we are leading with interoperability and then with the ecosystem thinking.
So I'm going to ask one final question before I open it up. And this is a very basic question, but I think each of you might take it in a slightly different direction. Is there an actual cost associated with sort of achieving an ideal, interoperable, seamless experience? And if so, how do you think about that cost? Is it just something you incur because it's the right thing to do? Or how do you, how does your company kind of think about that?
I can start. I would not say, I would rather see it as an investment. So we all need to invest. We are all here to do business. It comes with a cost or with an investment. So for instance, you said operation needs to be in local language, etc. And then luckily we have some AI that is now supporting us. So that is the investment. It's an investment in AI, and now we see that charger uptime, utilization that will improve, meaning that there will be a better and more seamless charging experience. There will be more consumption, more revenue. So again, it's an investment, and hopefully also there will be an return on that investment.
If I continue from my side, so I fully agree. I like to think of it as an investment, investment into scale, because if you don't have that seamless customer experience, then that will slow down adoption. Whereas if it is seamless and pleasurable to drivers, then we will support the transition to e-mobility. But the way I also like to think about it is that what is the cost of not investing into this? And to me, it's bigger than the cost of investing into customer experience. not investing in it has, direct consequences, so increase customer support costs and so on. But then perhaps the macro level consequence and cost is that when you have those poor experiences that will linger in the social media for a long time, that will then undermine the EV charging experience and through that also slow down adoption. So I think there is a high cost in not investing in customer experience.
Just to put a number on that, and that I think I completely agree, Sofia, with what you said. I was reading some documents by the team the other day, and there was a percentage in there which was actually placed positively, which is it's really good because 70% of EV drivers are actually thinking of buying a second electric car. I think that's a terrible percentage because the way I see it is there are 30% who are not thinking because they didn't have a positive experience. That's a huge churn. So losing that chunk of current EV drivers because for some reason their experience wasn't positive is very expensive. So I agree when you say the cost of not putting this investment up front, which isn't a cost. I mean, that's the cost. The other I see as an investment to have something that makes sense, is that scales up adequately, doesn't build the wrong sort of social media, and doesn't allow for space for the right, for that resistance that we see sometimes, either political or whatever. I think is very important. So critical to invest in a great customer service, seamless customer experience right from day one, and it's an investment.
Well, yes, I like the investment rather than cost better. All the more so since I was trying to think about your earlier questions, me being very slow, about what innovations are we working on at ChargePoint, and they're actually all boiled down to either, as you said, Sofia, making the hardware or products more interoperable. So there's plug and charge, all that stuff. Then the second is more making them more reliable or serviceable. So actually seamless experience, more trustworthy experience, etc. And the third thing is we do a lot of sort of services, and also we're working on a charging experience that is, we're even left the word seamless now, it's blended. So ha ha ha, wait a month and you'll see. And so all of that investment is actually less the cool technological gadgety things and more can the experience be better. But there's a real belief in our company, but clearly in yours as well, that this will turn into a return on this investment that will be very solid, not just because it will be better for the customer, but because actually it will make charging more, it will increase the rate of charging.
You heard it here first. Investment, not cost. So with that, I will open it up. I have lots more questions to ask, but we'd love to hear from you if you have any questions for our panelists.
I'm Stefan from Ampeco. We are also a software platform provider. I mean, all this with the user experience, it's I don't think anyone disputes that. But how do you think we should also evolve the roaming part? Because that now, especially in Europe, is a bigger problem. When you are more like a vertically integrated like ChargePoint, it's much easier. And when people, provide the MSP and the CPO, it's easy. But about the roaming, where do you see the biggest bottlenecks and where we should focus to make sure it's as seamless as possible?
So I'm so happy you raised roaming, because that was my first job at ChargePoint. And when I joined the company, there were 8,000 ports in the app in Europe. And so now there's a lot more. So I think at ChargePoint, and I think everywhere else, Plugsurfing being the example to us all, but roaming is an integral part of the experience. It's it's a long time ago, certainly in Europe, North America as well. Actually, we've integrated with a lot of the other players in North America, because the European model, as you said, has come to America, and people realize that actually the availability of chargers is more important, and people need to have roaming agreements. But yes, roaming is of course essential to the charging experience. For me, it's essential to finding a charger, which is for the first, as I said in my silly introduction, It's the first step. You want to charge, you need to find the charger. They need, whatever app you use, whatever system you use, you need to know where the chargers around you are, because otherwise you're not going to buy an electric vehicle because it's going to be too scary. And we're probably now in the phase where everybody who is vaguely interested in buying an electric vehicle has bought one, and their grandmother and their cousin and everything. Everyone else who's still on the old version of cars, it's because they're terrified that they're going to be stranded somewhere. So we'll only manage this sort of last hurdle if infrastructure is readily available, visible to everybody, and without roaming, we can't achieve that.
What do we want to improve in the current state of the roaming? Because we all know it's messy. So, based on your perspective, what do you think we should all work together as a group to make it a better user experience? I'll give one example. I hate it when I don't see the meter readings when I'm charging in roaming in a lot of places. But what else you think it should be okay? Let's say this is the thing we want to solve together to make roaming a better experience. What should be? I mean, I fully agree with you. I mean, roaming is an integral part of the whole journey.
I love roaming, but I also want to give Sofia a chance in case you
I also love
So we just agreed that we'll make a short comment and then give it to Sofia. So in Spirii we have more than 1 million charges in our app. So that is roaming. But I also see the challenge, and that is the challenge on transparent pricing, because you will have a price, but is it the best price, or can you go to another app and have a better price? And then I will give it to you.
Thank you. I think, was it Stefan who asked the question? We can spend a bit more time after the panel discussing, because roaming is such a big and complex world. So it depends very much on which angle you want to take the conversation from. But sort of to stay within the time limits, I will perhaps focus on the most basic things, which we still struggle with today, also in Europe, so not only in the US. So what's the first thing, for improving roaming? Like, roaming needs to be there first. You still have players who are not open to roaming, and then you have players who technically say, yes, we will roam with you, we will give you access to my network, but the prices that come with it are just not competitive, borderline hostile, which then again, is that roaming or not? Technically yes, but in practice perhaps not. So going back to the 3 C's for Plugsurfing, so coverage is, roaming exists and we do that. The second one, costs, so then it needs to be a reasonable cost. And then the third one is consistency. So there we start getting into the interesting conversations of how do we make sure that the data flows sort of back and forth between, in our case as well, 1 million charging points, hundreds and hundreds of CPOs, multiple countries, different VATs, many different B2B customers, fleets, car manufacturers. And that is what we call roaming operations, and that is what I was referring to at the beginning when I said that we as Plugsurfing feel that it's most efficient for the system for this to be sort of solved in one place, and that is what we're trying to do as Plugsurfing. So solving that roaming problem efficiently for the whole industry, hopefully.
Can I join the conversation with Stefan?
I have a question on price transparency, and there's a lot of frustration out there among the end users, EV drivers, on the phenomenon of price transparency or the lack thereof. It's becoming increasingly difficult to inform the EV driver of the different types of price aspects you're including in your charging sessions. Latching on to Vera's point, the churn rate for EV drivers, or at least getting a second EV, is not very high in some places, although the consumer organization, which is global, says that most EV drivers are keen to buy another EV. But on price transparency specifically, do you have any thoughts on how we as an industry could do a better job? Because policymakers are certainly turning to us.
Yes. So firstly, when talking about price transparency, I always sort of like to distinguish between visibility and simplicity, because when you say price transparency, it can also just mean that you see the price, but I don't think that's sufficient, because at times what you see is a horror show of, multiple different business models, pricing levels, pricing components, different components kicking in at the different time during the charging sessions, before, after, this and that. It's so complicated that the average driver just don't understand. Even if you see the price, you just do not understand what you will end up paying. So I think we need to work on both of these. So making it visible and then making it simple. In terms of visibility, I think that's more easy to solve technically. Technically, you just show the price in the app, to simplify. In order to have the price be simple, that is where you need to have the different ecosystem players, the different companies from the different positions in the value chain come together and realize and understand that we can't work in silos. So we can't have the CPO say, this is what I want to do, da da da. The EMP does the same. Then you have the fleet, you have the car manufacturer who does the same. You throw in the payment systems, and then all of a sudden you have this very complex, pricing that you're trying to present to the customer, and they will not understand. So I think there needs to be more of that sort of coming together, and thinking about the whole ecosystem and feeling responsibility towards the end user. That is sort of the driver, and not sort of plan individually in silos and then add everything on top of it and then throw it towards the drivers.
Agree that there should be the transparency. I do believe that it should be a given that you can see it in there. Whatever price elements there are, it should be visible. And I guess that is also a regulation. It should be there. But I also think it's a balance. You say that the different CPOs have different price elements. There are different use cases. So we also have to respect somehow that different use cases will require different price elements, and then everything is a balance. So finding the right balance, but I absolutely agree it should be done together, and then think about the EV driver and not about the infrastructure. So the experience should be around the driver and not around the infrastructure.
So, I mean, obviously taking visibility for granted. I think we all agree on that. On the simplicity, I think at some point things will play out towards some more standardized ways of pricing, and more homogeneous ways of pricing, and that comes with maturity of the industry per se. I think we're all trying out different models. Everybody's trying to get their little piece of the pie. As competition builds up, and we have and we have more sophisticated users, I think that we will, across the chain, and we come together amongst ourselves, we will price necessarily more, in a simpler way. It's never going to be completely simple. I mean, if we think of energy retail today, and we've been using electricity for decades, it's still, and when you look at your bill, it's still a nightmare. Whatever country you think about, there's still the variable, the fixed component, the public part, the private part, the margin, it's a nightmare. That also suggests that it's up to whoever has that end user relationship to simplify that communication. So, for example, in energy, what we do is we are obliged by the regulator to have a horrible bill with visibility over every single component. Great, no, but the end customer, all he wants to do is understand the bill. And so then with it, we have a very simple email that says, this is how much you're paying and why. And I think that that's something that everyone who has the end user relationship is going to evolve towards. Simplifying or translating into something which is maybe more aggregated, maybe not so transparent, but more understandable by the end user.
So obviously I agree with everything just said. Well, there are two things that I think we should think about when we think about being too prescriptive, and then we should probably to bear in mind. The first thing is, we are in a more sophisticated environment, and oftentimes charging is not just offered as a single thing; it's offered as part of the package of other array of services. And so it becomes a lot harder than to just say, well, you guys should just charge this amount, because actually maybe the experience is enriched by other things. It comes as part of a another package, like an app that does other things as well, comes as part of an employee benefit, all sorts of things. So being sort of really sort of too standardized into what the pricing should be, I think is probably something to, think about maybe more than once. And the other thing is, I still think that a lot of the issues are related to the lack of infrastructure in Europe. We talked about coverage. It is the first C. You do need more infrastructure everywhere, AC and DC. And so we're not going to encourage this nice investment from everyone if we constrain the revenue that people can make on their infrastructure. So I, of course, 300% agree with the idea that you should, as a driver, always know how much you're going to be charged. CF my war stories from earlier, but constraining it in structure or in ceiling or in any other way is probably also something that might be a little risky for the development of the industry and the infrastructure.
You can take one more question if there's a back there. Amélie Valroger from Evans, a leasing company. So first of all, thank you for this great panel, female panel. So we're really glad to see that. And my question is around the tool car fleet. We will, in the coming days, publish a report on electrification of fleet. And one of our conclusions is that the tool car, the car we use to perform tasks of our job and so on, are really low penetration of electric vehicle, 5%. And one of the main reasons of this low electrification rate is, of course, the mindset, the change management, but also charging infrastructure, charging experience. So my question to you is, how do you address the fleet experience, not only addressing driver, but also the customer, so companies' experience? It's linked to the coverage, consistency, and pricing, but maybe additional things. I think about mission critical, the service level KPIs, just to make sure that we charge efficiently and in a really fast timing.
So I feel particularly well placed to answer this question because Amélie is in fact my customer.
For this very solution. And I'm hearing between the lines that Amélie is not always super happy about the level of experience she's getting. Feedback is a gift. But it's true that actually it's incredibly, electric fleets are incredibly hard to deliver. That's absolutely true because there's multiple customers to satisfy. There is the end driver who sometimes hasn't actually really chosen to have an electric car. He's just been told by his HR director or that now it's going to be electric. So they need to get used to the idea, or have a home charger forcibly installed to their lovely house. Sometimes they don't want it, but they are made to, because the whole electrification of a company fleet only works if the driver can also charge at home. Otherwise, the total cost of ownership for the vehicle is too high. So the driver who is fine, like driving a normal car, is now being given an electric car, has to learn to drive it, has to learn to deal with charging, planning, etc., and get a home charger and overcome all these aspects of the experience, which are not always a choice. And then the intermediary that we talk to is the employer. And they also need to understand the finer details, right? Most people who electrify their fleet are not actually electric mobility specialists. Otherwise, they would have done this themselves. If they turn to an external provider, it's because they need to learn everything on the journey. And so this is where I think it's not just, it is about making the experience better. I'm thinking about how you sort of, evangelize, teach, make yourself better, explain to the customer. But so much of it also is about in putting service and support back. And I think this is probably one of the, and I think ChargePoint is also guilty of having done this. It's such a exciting technology, engineering-led industry that we forgot that in the end, it's people. And people, they need to be talking to a real person who's going to tell them. I mean, how many times have I talked to a driver who's like, oh, I'm so terrified. Is this really hard to drive an electric car? And I ended up like having this long conversation with them when really they called about something else. Because it's also about explaining and supporting these people, and maybe it's not always done by, well, AI is of course a great help, but it's not always done by, self-serving tickets and so on. So reinjecting more human service into the whole charging experience is probably going to be helping partially with the problem you described, and that's very real. I absolutely agree.
So I think you touch on it, operational excellence, but that is in the whole value chain. So again, understanding the use case. So if it's home charging or if it's destination charging, it is different use cases where we will have different steps in the value chain. So it is a matter of 24/7 operations, and hopefully AI will give us the uptime you need, and then we will bring in the people when needed. But I really believe it's operational excellence, and it's not only in the core operation, it's also operational excellence in finance and in payments, because that's also what you feel as a fleet manager when you have all the issues, when the employees call you and say, why do I've got this bill or whatever issues. So it is understanding the end client.
And perhaps one thing I could add, and nothing new to you, but reporting obviously for fleet managers, because it is about that total cost of ownership. And it is about making sure that, the fleets, the cars are out there doing their job. Every minute that they potentially spend, for instance, queuing, is away from being able to actively do their job. So I would say reporting, then making sure that there's access to chargers, fast enough chargers, and then also sort of having a 360 view in terms of, home charging, public charging, workplace charging. So it needs to be sort of comprehensive, but nothing new to you, but definitely when it's not sort of only B2C or only B2B, but it's B2B2C, and some other forms of that as well, then you need to, because you have a human being on each of these different levels, and you do need to sort of make them happy as well. So it becomes a bit more complicated, and something that's attractive and interesting to a fleet manager might not be interesting and attractive to a consumer.
Just to add, in these first steps of electrifying a fleet, which I think are very challenging, I think it's quite important that we come together and we work with specific fleets to really understand what's the use case. Because it will be different from fleet to fleet, but depending on the type of service that fleet delivers, the logistical operation that fleet supports, and it's very different to a residential or to a private charging experience. But it will certainly mean that from our side we need to design the different processes. But it may also mean that we challenge you to rethink your own processes. It's much like employing AI. AI only makes a difference for a company, not when you use AI in processes that already exist. It's when you use AI, but you rethink the process to really leverage from it. So I think it requires that there's a lot of work done between the two parts, and that eventually from a fleet management perspective, you also rethink how you manage that fleet. And just to leave the challenge on both sides, because I think there's potential there.
Thank you all for the questions. We have just 2-3 minutes left, so not a lot of time. I do want to ask one lightning round question, but just to kind of recap the conversation, we heard about the 3 C's: coverage, cost, consistency for seamless customer experience. Investment is not a cost, which I like the reframe. Country policies can be good or bad, depending on how they're framed. And then I think the final thing is the storytelling piece that we need to get better at, but also keep it really boring for the customer. So with that, my final lightning round question, 30 seconds each. If the panel reconvened in 5 years and you had a magic wand between now and then, what headline would you like to see about the customer experience? We'll start with you, Stephanie. You got the sign.
Okay. I'd like to see 90% of public parking spaces are equipped with a charger. Because, yeah, you just heard it. Everybody goes, you have a charger at home or you don't. You go to the dentist, you go to the restaurant, you go to the supermarket, you pick up your kid in school. Is that like if you're the teacher? Meeting, you're here for an hour. Every time you charge, you don't even think about it.
I'd actually like us not to be talking about the user experience. That's a check. I'd like us to be talking about how smart EV charging is powering the new grid and how that can also be an opportunity for fleet managers. Is that an interesting business opportunity to think of your fleet as a power generating platform that you can also monetize in some way? I'd like this sort of disruptive discussion to be what's on the panel in 5 years. Earlier if possible.
I think we would have removed the E. It's just mobility. It's mobility for all of us, everywhere. So the E is gone. If that is boring or fun, it's up for the clients or customers to judge.
So I'm gonna go with a combination of what Vera and Maria said. So I would like to see no headline because this will no longer be a thing. And I think that's what you were sort of alluding to as well. So there will be no transition because we will have transition already. So we will have different topics, but we would not be talking about immobility. So I think that's the absence of any immobility related headline would make me happy.
All right. We'll see you in 5 years.
We'll need some men in 5 years.
Well, thank you all so much. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panelists.